Hello and welcome to the podcast From Self-Development to Self-Dissolution. My name is Laura Deva and I'm going to be your host for those multiple episodes geeking around topics to understand what is self-development, how do we develop the self, and then how do we surrender the self to know our deepest true nature. I'm a clinical psychologist and I'm also a seeker of truth. I went through many different lifetimes in once, and I want to share with you a lot of those gems that I have discovered along my path. I wish you a beautiful next episode. So when we shift perspective from the individual consciousness to the collective consciousness, there is a shift into who's that happening to. In the individual consciousness, also called the personality realm, everything is happening to me. Everything is defined through the lens of I, and everything is my identity. It's a possessive reality in which the mirror is just filtered through my own lens perspective, individual perspective. When we shift the perception into the collective consciousness, then everything is happening through me. So I'm a vessel for some forces to move through me, whether I'm consciously aware of it or unconsciously aware of it. This is constantly happening. There's been, in psychology, the one who has made the most study about that and that I start to bring collective unconsciousness was Jung. In esoterics, we can speak from a perspective shift from personality to soul. And so when we speak about the soul realm is the Pleiades at play. It's all the god and goddesses, all the forces of the universe that are moving through individual being in some determined moments. Once again, whether you're conscious or unconscious of what's going on, it will happen through us. It will start to take place or morph or densify depending on our personal experiences of life. There might be crucial moments that will define whether or not we will more identify to one of those energies, also called archetypes. In the archetypes realm, those forces have been at play ever since centuries. It's the tapestry of archetypes that are at play since the beginning of this existence. Even the world was created because some of those forces were at fight, and some of the forces are also in love, which speaks about polarity, about contrasted reality. So when we're in a realm of polarities, which is still the case in the soul realm, every forces will be polarized to each other. And when we speak about polarity, either they're going to be attracted to each other, so falling in love with each other. And we find a lot of that in the mythology. So some god fall in love with some goddesses, and then they come in fights, and then you need to resolve that fight. So all this drama of the Pleiades is actually what's happening in the realm of the soul realm and the archetypes. So either they're in love, either they're fighting, and there is always that same universal story that speaks about war and love, which is also what's happening in the world in general. So that's what I mean. There is always, the soul realm is always transposed to our personal identification and our personal story, whether we are conscious, whether we're aware, or whether we're not aware. So one of the maps that I prefer the most in the archetypes realm, in the soul realm, was given by Bruce Lyon, and that simplify the map of totality, so the map of all archetypes in 4 quadrants, having 2 axes. The vertical axis representing the polarity between spirit and matter, and the horizontal axis representing the polarity between feminine and masculine. So within that map, what it's offered is 4 different quadrants that will give a nuance or a flavor of those different energies. So those 4 quadrants are divided then in spirit and feminine would be light feminine, matter and feminine would be dark feminine, Spirit and masculine would be light masculine, and masculine and matter would be dark masculine. Within those quadrants, thousands of archetypes can live. Many gods and goddesses of so many traditions can be placed around that map in different positions, depending on how much they define into the feminine masculine realm, or how much they define into the lightness or the density. So when we speak about light and dark, it's not so much about pure and impure, but it's more about lightness and density. And of course, everything that lives more into the density tends also to be even covered by a lot of shadow, but there's also shadow into the light realm of existence. So in this specific video, I want to amplify a little bit more the contrast between the light and the dark feminine specifically. We'll keep the masculine for another moment. But right now I want to talk especially about that. And the relationship, if we would to qualify just the light feminine and the dark feminine as two entities, which is incorrect because a lot of archetypes lives into this quadrant. But if we would just take them as a whole, it would be almost like a relationship between two sisters, and we could call that the relationship between the light sister and the dark sister. Obviously, those two sisters, we can almost call that twins. They're twins, they're part of the same totality, but they divided their consciousness depending on how do they shape their identity. Within the life of one being, and especially of a woman that will identify with those archetypes, there is, for me, in my experience of the women that I worked with, and also in my personal experience, there tends to be a choice at one point. There tend to be a direction that is given, and usually that direction is given by episodes in life, or maybe even like moments where we swear to ourselves, where we promise to ourselves that we would not be this or that we would not go there, depending on the images that we received as a child, the references that we had as a child of the mother figure or the feminine figure around us. And that specific moment can come and bring a fracture into this sense of totality. Because as a child, those qualities are almost like there all the time. So if we take a little bit of the qualities of the light feminine, who's more connected to the heart, a bit more disconnected from the lower part of the being and the lower chakras that represent more the sexuality and the power, and the capacity to feel the unseen, to occupy space with her presence. So this would be more of the dark feminine aspect. She lives in matter, she lives in density, she lives in power. She is big and strong and capable to transmute energy in her best versions. In her worst version, she's just capable of creating earthquake and chaos and drama and intense wave of rebellion and furiousness if she is unhappy. So in the realm of the dark feminine, the representative, it's more what I call the serpent or the snake that lives more into the earth, that is slow, that is dense, that has a dormant power when it awakens. And in the light feminine, so it's more the light qualities of the heart, of the compassion, of the feelings, and the representative of the light feminine to me is the rose. So the light and the dark feminine relationship is the relationship between the rose and the serpent. And one of those two will eventually awaken a little bit more, given by the direction of some of the experiences. In my own experience, in my own life, I know exactly when, or not exactly when, but I know how that fracture has happened, which led me to choose to become more loyal to the dark feminine, more than the light feminine that I mistrusted a lot. And the moment that this fracture occurred in my own life was because I have seen the women in my life being cheated on. I have been the witness of those cheating moments, and I have kept them secret because I was obliged to, whether by my father or my stepfather, cheating either on my mom or my stepmother. And I became aware of those moments without them, the woman, being aware of it. And I was holding the secret of their infidelity, of their betrayal, and I kept it for me because I was kind of loyal to the men of my life, my stepfather and my dad. And I know something in my psyche at that moment interpreted that it wasn't safe to trust men, and it wasn't safe to be naive to those men. And I swore to God and I promised to myself that never ever I would be this naive woman waiting for a man to tell them the truth when actually they're just going around betraying them and cheating onto them. Which created a real... I don't know how to call it. It created like almost like the birth of a structure within my psyche, in which, in giving myself that promise, I had chosen which sister I would to be the most intimate with, and which sister I would be away from. And on this being away from, it would be also not trusting it, not wanting it closer to me, because it would be constantly the image or the reflection of the failure of the feminine that I had under my eyes, and that I promised that I would never ever be this. So any light or any figure of light feminine in my teenage or in my young adult self was repulsive to me. It was just a reminder of failure, naivety, and stupidity of the feminine. So therefore, in order to get away from that archetype, in order to not have that wound coming over again and again in the feelings, one, I needed to strongly identify with its polarity, which is the dark feminine, and dive into those qualities. So the identification would densify more and more, becoming an authority of identity that no one could question. And in the same time, that would allow me to polarize so much with that energy that I was fearing so much to be identified with, because otherwise it would mean that I would be weak and naive, which is something I promised myself not to be. So I would have to take really a lot of distance with that energy. And so judgment and critics of that energy would help me to keep that distance, and over-identification with the dark feminine, so that that polarity and that repulsive magnet would create a force that would allow me to stay at the right distance from the energy that would actually break my heart, which is the light feminine. Because if I would to touch that aspect, I would have to feel the deepest wound that it is to love and to be betrayed in the love that you are. So of course the repercussion of such fracture in a woman's life is terrible to some extent, because the women that we are meant to be all the shades of the feminine. There is not such a woman that is just one thing, that is just a seductress, or that is just like a compassionate being of light, or is just a fairy, or is just like a wild woman, or is just a mother. And actually we see a lot of that split even in our society in general, with the Madonna horse split that plays out in a lot of relating realms. Who's the woman that we want to marry? Who's the woman that we want to fuck? And so this is a big representative of our society, with the wife and the mistress. So the mistress will live in the shadow. She will more represent the forces of the dark feminine, who's very independent, very so not very surrendered into a marriage, for example. She's very sexual. She knows her power, sexuality. She's very sexy. So she's very enticing, seductive. She's like a live poison that entices you into her web, and it's impossible to resist. So that quality is that she has fractures herself from the other one, makes her not being able to be chosen. So she's going to be kind of locked into this jail of being the woman that everyone wants to fuck, but no one wants to marry. And I've certainly felt a lot of that in my life, and I've got, suffering and pain that probably I still need to heal from the own jail that I've created for myself. Because in order to amplify some of the quality of the dark feminine, you have to abandon some of the quality of the light feminine. So those qualities of being devoted, of being surrendered, of following, of not being the one in charge, will actually disappear in that choice. And in disappearing in that choice, it starts to make you unavailable to be chosen for partnership, because those qualities are necessarily fundamental and important into a relationship with someone, so that those polarity can be at play with some other aspect of the masculine that want to choose someone that surrendered to its choice. So that split will have occurrent consequences into a woman's life. On the other side, on the other spectrum, if a woman has identified herself way more with the lighter aspect of the feminine, and her choice was more, I'm never going to be the one who created pain in my parents' marriage. Yeah? Maybe this is it. It's like a young girl that witnessed the devastation of the mother and of the marriage, because maybe the dad has cheated upon the mother, and it just created a fantasy around who's this woman that just split up my family and my parents. And maybe it's the promise at that moment, I will never be the one that creates harm. And so in that promise, I will always do good, I will always be kind, I will never take what I want, my desires will be numbed, so that I can be the one that never creates the pain that my parents went through and that I went through as a child. So more on that spectrum, the consequences of that choice will make to that woman her being disconnected from her pleasure, from her desires. Because if she dares to go down into her pleasure and her desires, she will take the risk that suddenly she will want something that is not allowed by the promise that she gave to herself. And if she wants something that it's not allowed, it will create such a conflict in her structure that this is not going to be okay for her. So a compromise in becoming that archetype, that like feminine archetype, will be that she will put her desires and her pleasure second, and she will always leave space for the other. She will be a woman who will be a pleaser. She will be in service. She will also have a certain naivety to others that will move from a place of desire and pleasure. She will potentially really judge women that are more comfortable in their body, more comfortable in their sexuality or pleasure, or that they know what they want, they say it and they go for it. She will avoid those kind of women. Maybe even if in her heart she can try to find love, and she will probably express that she has love for everyone, she'll always find a place where she's kind of avoiding to be faced to what will remind her her deepest wound, which is desire creates torture in a family constellation. So in order to not come close to the deepest wounding of her heart, she will just become, identify and densify into that identity that will make her probably be chosen. And probably in an early age, she will be the woman that man wants to marry, because she's creating safety. she is very secure for anyone because her desires are coming last. So being around her is very secure for anyone. She's never going to cheat on you. She's never want to take more of you. She's never want to argue with you. She'll be the perfect housewife that will just minimize everything about herself so that she can be of service and of devotion and dedication. Of course, that comes with consequences because, like I say, there is a place of suffering in both of those quadrants, whether you are fervently choosing one of them because you want to avoid your deepest wound. There'll be always, in the unconscious fantasies of the light feminine, a place in her that fantasizes that she could be wild. She could really let go of control, stop controlling everything about her and just being completely untamed. That she could just have a one-night stand one day in her life. That she could do something crazy. She will fantasize about that. Whether she's conscious or unconscious, maybe it's in a dream, maybe it's in a fantasy, maybe it's just while she watches a movie and then suddenly she's touched by one of the persona in the film that is incarnating this. Whatever that is, it will touch parts of her unconscious that are yelling, that are calling her, like her twin sister is calling her to totality. Come and meet me so that we can be together and we can be total. And in the reverse, it's going to be the same, but in the opposite, in this wild power of this independent woman that has so many lovers, but no one that really wants to be with her. She's never been proposed. She has never been even asked to have a child with because she creates too much insecurity. She creates desire and passion. She's enticing. She creates obsession in someone's mind. She has that power, but she's so creating insecurity that no one dares to choose her. So in her unconscious lies the secret desire and fantasy to totally surrender, to have an open heart, to trust, to not always being on guards, to not always being controlling of all of a reality, to not always be in the doubt whether or not men are there because she has seduced them or really because they love her. Because she's always going to have that doubt in her head. Every time that even a man will be close to her, she'll be happy for a moment because she could have them in the web of the spider web of her creation. But in the same time, she will doubt, are they just hypnotized by my venom, by my capacity of hypnose, or are they there because they really see me and love me? And that will always be a curse. She will always doubt love. She doesn't know love. The heart is not activated. The heart is shut. She hasn't have access to the roses. So she will doubt love. When her sister will doubt her power and her capacity to be in her body, she will doubt the love that she is. So in her fantasies, she will always long to be heart open, surrendered, leaning forward, leaning back, relaxing, receiving. She doesn't know how to receive. She has to manipulate in her web of unseen perception. Through her desire, she'll hook what she wants. And even if it doesn't appear that she is doing so, because we're still speaking about the feminine takes in a very different way. It's not apparent, it's subtle, it's unseen. So even if it's not seen, that she is activating through her desires what she wants to take, she will always doubt that whatever is in her web is there because of who she really is, but not just because of her power that are creating and enhancing her insecurities. So how do we reconcile the eternal sisterhood wound? Because this duality or this this breach, this fracture between the two sisters is at the core of the sisterhood betrayal wound that I know every woman that will hear this video will kind of relate to into many various experiences in their life, or at least the fear. If it didn't happen to you as an experience, maybe you experienced just the fear of other women, maybe that you can't really trust 100% what is happening in sisterhood. So the sisterhood wound really take its root into this fracture. So how do we reunite those two sisters, those two twins? How do we bring them back together? First of all, it has to come from a recognition that one is not better than the other one. They have qualities that are actually medicine for each other. So one of the things that you can do with any archetype integration play is to go and sit in the opposite polarity of the archetype that you identify with. So if you strongly identified with the dark feminine, then go and work with the light archetypes, the light feminine archetypes. Like force yourself of letting go of the dresses of your dark feminine and wear things that are closer to the archetypes. Hang out with women that holds more that energy so that you can receive transmission from. Be confronted maybe to the disgust, to the repulsion that can create in you. Because that disgust is the protection of your heartbreak, of the wound that you're trying to get away from. So expose yourself a little more to that disgust so that slowly that layer can melt and start really putting you in touch with what you're trying to avoid the most, which is that fear of that trauma piece that lives at the core of your choices or at the fracture point. So that's one of the aspects. It's like going and trying to complete yourself with what you've been fearing, judging, putting aside, putting away. An aspect that is important to remind ourselves with is that even through that fracture into that choice, it doesn't mean that the other archetype doesn't live within us. It just lives in our shadow. So I remember like in my over-identification with the dark feminine, no one would ever imagine, because I was so strong, people would just fear just my gaze in general. If you would come close to my man, I would just petrify you with my gaze. No one would imagine that lives inside of my heart such a sensitive being. So this light feminine was there, just locked away from the perception of anyone, but it was dormant there as an energy that was just being called to come forth. And most of the time, what I've actually realized over those years of working with women is that the dormant archetype is actually the stronger one. So if you over-identify as a dark feminine, most likely your strength lies in your light feminine. Yeah, just swallow that one. Your light feminine is probably stronger than your dark feminine if you identify with your dark. And the opposite also, if you identify with your light feminine, you have a strong, wild woman inside that is just waiting for the permission to be given and to come out and roar. So just swallow that information. That can already help you to have more humbleness into that path of coming close to your sister, and not only coming close to her, but then dropping the weapons, like really dropping peace and embracing her for who she is. And when you reconcile those two archetypes together, those two qualities of that quadrant together, the totality of the flavor of the feminine becomes like endless. You can be the most sensitive and beautiful being that tears in front of any moment of life that moves her, and you can be the wildest protector if something, and don't mess with my shit if something happens. So you can experience the wideness of sexual pleasure or orgasmic waves and being completely vibrant of pleasure in your body, and have your heart wide open and endless forgiving regardless of what comes. And that's the integration point. It's like when the light feminine with her open heart is also anchored in her power, then the compassion of the alchemy of power and heart of serpent and rose become real and authentic. It means that you can only become compassionate when you know the darkness of existence, when you feel it in you and you're giving it back its innocence. If you haven't done that work, every compassion that comes from the light feminine without being reconciled with her dark sister is just bullshit. It's bypass. And every forces of the dark feminine that hasn't reconciled with her light feminine is just chaotic destruction, just for her own interest and benefit. It has nothing to do with claiming and bringing forces that are connecting with the heart, with the clarity of boundaries and strong forces and erotic power, but with the heart that is open to the compassion and to the inclusivity of others. And if we bring that into sisterhood, and especially where the sisterhood usually breaks is around the fear of mating with men. This is where, okay, I'm scared that my sister would just sleep with my man or fuck me around with it. If you can celebrate each other's sexuality and knowing that each other's heart are also linked, there will be no movement in a sisterhood circle that would be threatening by my sister being sexually active and blooming, knowing that her heart is there with her and that my heart is there with her, because no one would want to hurt anyone in that. So that is what creates real safety also. It's not a safety that comes from, putting your desire or your need down. It's a safety that is rooted in the heart and power together. When you know both, when the sister reconcile, then there is real totality and real sisterhood that can occur into a group of women.